Good morning, everybody. Hope you are doing well with our lockdown and staying busy and trying to be productive in, our new normal for today. 40 days into this lockdown, and I'm sure we're all getting a little tired of all this extra time on our hands. Hard to get organized, and I have to admit it's been difficult for me as well. I love my gardening, so I've been out focusing on gardening, doing some exercises on a daily basis, which is awesome. Don't typically find time to do that on a normal basis. And interesting enough, I've taken up bread making with about a zillion other people in the world. And I thought this was more of a local thing until I start looking on the internet at some statistics. And interesting enough, found that you might be interested. The Spanish government reported flower sales 4 times more than normal. France has quadrupled flower sales, and the UK doubled their flower sales. France is up by 140% of their flower sales. And I'm going to show you a bit of a graphic here. And it shows that people Googling recipes for flour have just been stupid crazy. So not just a local thing, it is a worldwide thing. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why right now is everybody kind of doing this thing about baking bread? It's not the easiest thing. And what they say is that bread making could possibly, and I don't know if they really know, but it is a bit of a stress reliever and comforting, and demands patience, knowledge, and skill. So, I have to admit that it slows me down and it makes me think. But I do know it's a whole day process to make sourdough bread, and it's awesome results in the end. But it slows me down, and it takes me all day to make a loaf. And sometimes it's like a day and a half if I do it an overnight process. Certainly is a glimpse into cognitive behavioral therapies for sure. Very interesting phenomenon, and I'm sure there will be reports that you can read later on why people are doing this, why they think people are doing this, and it might be going right back to the primitive, our DNA, primitive markers in our DNA or something. I don't know, but it's something to ponder over anyways. But not why I put this video together, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But anyhow, we do have Chris Matthey with us from the Mortgage Professionals in Kingston. I've asked him to help me out, and as far as finding out what's going on in the markets today. It is a fast-moving industry, and same with real estate. So it's good to have up-to-date information so you guys can make the appropriate decisions that you need to make. So we're going to talk about the government's allowing, or the banks are allowing you to defer payments. What does that mean to you? And also what's going on today in the mortgage rates as comparatively to a few weeks ago. And we've got some other questions that we're going to be asking him as well. So anyways, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Matthey from the Mortgage Professionals, and I'll let you take it away, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you, Diane. So yeah, the first thing I think I'll touch on, because that's what I'm receiving the most calls and emails about, is deferral payments. So what's happened is there's a number of clients out there, a number of people who have had their income disrupted. They've suffered some negative consequence, whether it's been they've laid off or they're on staggered hours or whatever the case may be, and they might be having troubles meeting their financial obligations. So people have been contacting me to discuss their options. Now, I guess the first thing I'll say is this really is for people who have experienced that income disruption. It's not really seen as a strategy or a way to kind of put a hold on your mortgage just for kind of a vacation from making payments. It's really for those people who are having difficulties making their financial meeting their financial obligations. And there's a number of different ways that lenders are approaching it. Okay, there's not one set norm or one set standard. They kind of each have their own. The Coles notes on how you apply for it now is they've moved away from kind of the call center, and they've done a lot of online applications where you fill out a form and then somebody within 48 hours, they're trying to do, will contact you to discuss your specific situation. The form will provide some detail and some information as to your situation, and then the phone call just kind of solidifies or they go over any other questions that they might have. And some lenders will grant 1 month at a time, so you have to apply for it kind of each month. Some lenders will grant a certain period of months at a time, and again, it just depends on the specifics of the situation. There's also different ways that they are delivering the deferred payment. And by that, I mean, some of them just add the payments onto the back end of the term, whereas others, and this one seems to be the most common, are blending those payments into the remaining term of your payment. So in other words, if you've missed, let's say, 2 or 3 payments, or you've deferred 2 or 3 payments, what they are doing is they are adding that interest into the remaining interest on the mortgage. And it comes at a cost. So it's not just as if they're I think we have to remember that interest compounds semi-annually on a mortgage. So you are paying interest on interest. So it's not a free thing. It's not a, hey, I can defer my payments and there's no charge to it. There really is a charge, and you will notice it. And one of the things I've been advising my clients is, sure, it's going to cost you money. Sure, you're going to be paying interest, more interest than if you had not done this program. However, the financial implications and the credit implications to you bouncing payments on your credit cards, your lines of credit, and your mortgage could be far more severe than putting a deferred payment on your mortgage. The cost of interest on the mortgage could be, several $100s or whatever, depending on the amount of payments you defer and how much interest is charged on it. But the true cost of bouncing a number of payments with your mortgage and your credit it could be thousands, and it also could interrupt your ability in future to get another mortgage. Now, by deferring payment, I should mention, there is no consequence to your credit. There is no consequence to your future ability to get a mortgage. However, if you were to bounce payments on your credit card, bounce payments on your mortgage because you chose not to do the deferred program, it could complicate matters down the road in terms of your ability to get a mortgage, to refinance, to switch your mortgage, and it could lead to higher interest because you may not be able to go back with that A-rate lender. So those are a few cautions that I'm giving my client when it comes to deferred payment. So if there is that disruption, yes, I would look to defer that payment if there is any question or possibility that you are going to have troubles making any future payments.
Awesome, Chris. Chris, what steps can you suggest someone take who wants to consider the deferral payments?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always tell my clients, look, cash flow is king. You really need to sit down and figure out what your cash flow situation looks like and kind of project into the next month or next couple months, next few months, to kind of gauge, okay, what are my expenses coming up in terms of what are my monthly obligations and how much do I have sitting here in cash reserves? So let's assume I do not have income or my income is greatly reduced. You kind of have to project into the future what that cash flow situation is going to look like each and every single month. If you have the ability to ride it out for a few months, then I would hold on deferred payments because you have the reserves to do it. So that could save you money in terms of the interest that is no longer going to be tacked on to your mortgage. So if you can project out and be comfortable with your cash flow situation, then you're fine. However, if there's any question as to that cash flow being enough to pay for all of your financial obligations, property taxes, utilities, credit cards, car payments, mortgage, etc., that's when I'd be making that call to the lender. That's when I'd be looking at deferring your payment.
Great information. Chris, can you tell us what interest rates are doing right now?
So funny thing with interest rates, they seem to be changing almost daily. So a little bit of history or a little bit of Cole's notes on what's been happening. So back in January, February, when COVID was a thing that was happening in China, there began to be there was no whispers of it being overseas. There was some negative impact in the economy in general. There was some impact in terms of trade and all this sort of thing. And that's when we truly saw fixed rates bottomed out, okay? And that all has to do with activity that was going on in the stock market, which affected bond rate. Bond rate affects fixed rates. Then once we saw the kind of trickle effect of COVID coming across into North America, that's when we saw things get quite hectic in terms of well, as we realized, the government had to get involved and close everything off, et cetera, et cetera. Well, at that time, the government introduced their relief package, which was $100 million into the economy. And part of that was the majority of that was to help Canadians, but also it was to help the economy maintain its current health, I guess you could say. And because of this influx of money, we actually saw markets improve. We actually saw markets go back up 20 or 30%, whatever what is previously lost back when in January and February. And as a result, we actually saw fixed rates spike. We saw fixed rates go from kind of that 249, 259 range and spike on up to the 319s to the 329s. And then as, fast forward the next few weeks and up to present day, we start to see those fixed rates start to erode. Because what was happening now is we were seeing that there was a lack of activity in the market. We were starting to see kind of markets settle. Kind of markets are doing this up and down almost daily. But what started to happen is with the nature of competition, there was less activity in the market. There was less purchases going on. And so it was almost like a race to the bottom with lenders, whereby they were looking to attract switch business. So when your mortgage was coming due, you'd switch it to another lender. So they were trying to make their rates the lowest in the market to attract that switch business, and also refinance business. If the purchases aren't there because the market activity is not happening, a lot of lenders want to say, okay, let's address refinances. We'll be one of the lower rates in the market to address people who have to refinance to do renos or to pay off debt or whatever the case may be. So we started to see kind of that, again, that race to the bottom, fixed rates drop. And that's where we're at today with regards to fixed rates. So the average fixed rate right now can be anywhere from about 259 on insured purchases on up to about 279, 289 on refinances. Refinances do have a higher rate than do insured purchases. And there is a kind of a staggered pricing model as it relates to your purchase, rather your down payment amount as it relates to the value of the property. And that's something I can go on individually with each client. And then there's the variable rate side. And so on the variable rate side, kind of a completely different scenario that was happening is we saw from about February on to present day, prime rates start to drop and drop significantly. And again, prime rate is driven by the Bank of Canada. They set the overnight rate, which is the overnight rate is what kind of banks trade at in terms of their borrowing, bank-to-bank borrowing. And what the variable rate does is they tack on a certain percentage to determine, okay, here's our overnight rate and here's where our bank prime rate is. Bank prime rate today is 2.45%. And back in February, prime rate was 3.45%. So a significant drop of 1% to present day. As we saw prime rate drop, however, the lender's discount off of prime was no longer as attractive as it once was. So back in early this year, we had prime minus 1. So prime minus 1 would have been 3.45, which is prime, less the 1%, okay, putting your rate at 2.45%. And actually, sorry, I should say prime is actually at 3.95 at one point in time. So again, you'd be at 2.95%. But as prime rates started to erode, as prime rates started to drop, those prime minus 1 products turned into prime minus 80, prime minus 70, prime minus 40, prime minus 20. And so now lenders are between the prime and prime minus 20 is kind of around the discount. So the discount got worse while prime rate got lower. And simply it's just because banks can't be doing business at prime -1 when prime is 2.45%, because that interest rate is 1.45%, which is incredibly low. So people who have an existing variable rate mortgage are doing incredibly well. Those people who have who are just considering getting a mortgage, they now have that true option of variable versus fixed, because the spread between the two is so close.
What are your predictions on the interest rates? Now, if we lock down for another 2-3 months, how do you see this affecting interest rates going forward?
Yeah, it's so tough to predict because there's no real general consensus. We're facing something that it's never been seen before in past recessions. So if we think of the back in 2008, 2009, what happened was government stepped in. They put stimulus package into the economy. They put so much money into the economy in terms of infrastructure and all this. And eventually they ran up such a deficit that they shut the tap off. They said, okay, that's it. No more. We've run up such a deficit. It's now up to consumers to spend their money. So they did these incentives, like if you do home improvements such as windows or furnace or air conditioning, whatever, they would provide a significant rebate to the client. And so people were incentivized to put money on lines of credit and credit card, and they're incentivized with low interest rates to go out and spend their money. And Canadians did that. And Canadians did such a job of it that household debt has been the highest that it ever has been in Canada. And that is what the economy was partially relying on, was consumer spending. Okay. Fast forward to today, we're in this recessionary situation. We're seeing the government pump in $100 million into the economy. Eventually that's going to run out. And if it's like last time, they're going to try to turn to consumers to spend their money again, to inject their money into the economy. But the problem is, how much money does the average household or the average consumer have now that we've already maxed out credit cards and lines of credit, et cetera? And we've been out, unlike last time, there's been a huge disruption in income in terms of every household, I shouldn't say every household, a lot of households being laid off or having some sort of negative impact on their income. So one, we have people having less income. Two, we have people with less access to credit because they've already run it up previously. So will we have the same ability to put our own money into the economy is the question. And if not, then we can see kind of that prolonged impact of this recessionary situation going forward, which would lead one to believe that, yes, we would have low interest rates rather, going forward. Because again, fixed rates are based off of the stock market, the activity between the stock market and the bond market, because they have a bond rate, they set a certain profit spread, and that's where your fixed rate is. Whereas variable is determined on the prime rate, and prime rate is set to cause an effect on the economy. So I guess I gave you a really long answer to a short question. My personal opinion is it's going to be prolonged, but again, there's no real consensus, greater minds than me, there's no real consensus or prediction as to what's going to happen going forward, because we're in such uncharted territory here. But my personal opinion is that without the ability of the consumer to put their money back into the economy, we could be in for a long haul.
So what's your recommendation for people with the interest rates as they sit, whether they should renew their mortgages?
So if you're coming up for renewal, it really depends on the individual and the household. Okay, variable continues to be a great option, as does fixed. So it really depends on the people that I have in front of me. So for those people who have, not as much disposable income, they have, some fixed expenses, maybe they're a young family, that might not be a great fit for variable, because we don't know the projection of variable. We have some assumptions, we have some beliefs as to what's going to happen, but there is no guarantee. So the person who doesn't have a lot of disposable income, knowing what their payment is going to be for the next 5 years is a secure position for them to be in, probably a little bit more advisable for that person to be in. The person who is, on the other hand, that has the disposable income and that can handle the risk of not knowing where the future of rates are going to go, might be able to handle that risk, because there is some reason to believe that we could see fixed rates come down a little bit more. And so it might be a wise idea to kind of go into a short-term variable at prime or prime minus 20, because we don't foresee prime going up anytime soon. Ride that out until they are to the point where they're comfortable in locking in that rate. So in other words, if we see fixed rates continue to drop over the next several months, perhaps at that point they lock into a slightly lower rate than they would have 6 months prior or 4 months prior, whatever the case may be. So my recommendation in terms of fixed or variable really depends on the clients that I have in front of me. For people who are approaching their maturity date, for people who are within a year to 2 years, but that are accumulating debt right now because they are offsetting their lack of income with debt, that might be a great opportunity to consider a refinance because of the fact that rates are so low right now. As I mentioned earlier, there's that race to the bottom with lenders, whereby they're trying to offer the lowest rates in the market for refinances. And so now might be a great time to kind of look at their cash flow situation and see if it can be improved with a refinance. And then in terms of purchases, again, you're probably more of an authority than me in terms of whether or not it's the right time to buy, or if that should be put off for the next couple months.
Yeah, definitely. With the buying and selling process, there are a lot of things to consider right at this point. Like, we are considered an essential service, so we can definitely do transactions. The government would prefer that we wait if we absolutely can. But, for those who do need to buy and sell, we can still do it. There are things to take into consideration, and, we need to know that there are actual buyers in the market if you're going to sell. Is this the right time? Do you have to sell right now? You don't need to be desperate about it. I don't think we're going to see a downturn in pricing. There might be an interim drop, but I think the experts are saying that we should see strong growth to the end of the year. Now, obviously, everything could change if there's a second wave or whatever with this COVID situation. Biggest thing is job security. People, if they don't have a secure job in place, they might be considering holding off until we have more stability in that area for them and their families. But maybe you can touch on things that are happening from the mortgage side of things, what's taken place as far as the lenders go, and what's happening with the pre-approval process when people have interrupted jobs.
So actually, there's a couple of things that you mentioned in there that bring up a good point. Right now, lenders are really considering the income situation of the client. So if somebody is going through some kind of income reduction, if they are laid off or if they are on reduced hours, it's not a good idea to go into a purchase situation right now, because the lenders will not proceed with your application if you are laid off currently, and you will have to wait till you're back at work for the lender to consider that income.
Also, is the appraisal process? Has there been any changes with the appraisal process?
Appraisals have always played a role, or in the last couple of years have really played a significant role in the approval process for those who are putting 20% down or more. Okay. And so we have kind of an amended appraisal process whereby, pre-COVID, the appraiser would go into an individual's home, they would take pictures, and they would send a detailed report based on comparable sales and everything like that in the area. Now it's more of I don't want to say drive-by, because there are still, they go to the site of the property, they kind of take some exterior pictures, and then they have the client email pictures from the inside to give the lender an idea of what the inside condition is of the property. And then, of course, they do the comparable sales. So appraisals are still important. It's just the process itself is a little different than what it once was.
Chris, do you see, with the unpredictability of everything right now, and possibly a downturn in pricing over a long period of time, that there might be some problems with closings if the prices continue to drop?
Yeah, it's possible. it's so hard to predict what's going to go. I guess as of right now, all of the purchases that I've done, and there hasn't been a whole bunch because it has slowed significantly, but those purchases that have been done, that have required an appraisal, the values have held. And there's still been purchases that have gone above list price. We're seeing that in the last couple of years with these unconditional offers, multiple offers, and offers above list. And they were still coming in at value in terms of the appraisal for the most part. And as of today, that still seems to be the case. The appraisals that have been done, the values have been holding. And even on the refinance side, actually, for those, we have a general idea of what a house might be worth, perhaps based on kind of the market information that's out there. And those values have held pretty steady. Now, what will happen in the next few months, it's very tough to tell because, typically right now we're seeing closing dates, multiple dates in July and August. We're having those sales happen now for closing dates in July and August. And right now that pipeline is very dry compared to years previous. So it could lead to a drop in values, but it's so hard to say right now.
With respect to the mortgage approval process, Chris, has things started to get back to normal and start to smooth out any?
When the disruption of COVID first occurred, we saw, offices closing, we saw all the lenders closing, and everybody shifted to kind of working from home. And I can tell you that things are a lot smoother now, and the turnaround times are kind of back to the norm that they once were, right? Pre-COVID, you would send in your purchase application, and you typically have a response back within 2 to 3 business days. And that's where we're at right now. So they've kind of weathered the storm. People are working from home. They've got their processes in place. There was a few bumps in the road initially, but they've got those pretty much ironed out. And now we're back to kind of those classic turnaround times. But now there's just, again, more emphasis being put on employment. So whereas before they would do one call to your employer to kind of confirm the details of your employment, right? Confirm the details that was on the employment letter or whatever the case may be. Now they're doing a couple of calls. So they're doing one initially, and then they're doing one just before closing, a week before closing or something like that, to confirm that that person is still employed just because of this disruption of income. And so that is something that we hadn't seen previous. Once they made the call, they kind of moved on from it and did the rest of the conditions. Now we're seeing it being done kind of early in the process, and then again late in the process, just to confirm the person's still working. So again, if there's any hint or any question as to whether or not you might be affected by this, like your employer might lay you off or whatever, I would hold off on making that purchase until things are a little bit more settled.
Thanks, Chris. That's been great information. Now, tell me, who is your ideal client?
My ideal client, I'll tell you, I love to educate. I don't sell. I say to people, I don't sell anything. I educate my clients so that they can kind of make an informed decision as to what's the right fit for them. And as a result, I love working with first-time home buyers because they're starting from scratch. They're a blank slate, and I love to help people out in that situation. It's a very exciting time, and also people that are looking to refinance. So people that have debt, people that have some equity in their home, some debt that they've accumulated, credit cards and lines of credit. Because I really like taking a scenario and seeing if I can improve their cash flow and put a plan in place that gets them further ahead than what they are right now. Because credit, unfortunately, has become the never, never plan. We went from kind of a society that was the save to buy, like our grandparents' generation was, we save up to buy because there was no credit cards back in that day. And fast forward to today, we're very much instant gratification. So it goes on credit, and the mentality is, I can afford to pay this much per month. And then once they get comfortable making that payment, they can afford to pay a little bit more per month and a little bit more per month. And then one day they wake up and there's multiple credit leeches on them that are taking away money every single month, and then they're left with less and less each month. And unfortunately, that's a really terrible feeling to have, especially because credit card and line of credit debt calculates interest on a monthly basis at a much higher rate than what a mortgage does. A mortgage has a much lower interest rate, and the interest on it is only calculated twice a year. So I love taking a client that is in that situation and kind of showing them a better option as it relates to their finances, and showing them how to kind of position themselves so that they can save tens of thousands of dollars in interest and get all of their credit wiped out and their mortgage paid off sooner than kind of the track that they're on currently. So although I love dealing with everybody, I get a real kick out of first-time home buyers and people that are looking to refinance to pay off debt, so I can kind of put that plan in place for them and help them out in that regard.
Chris, if somebody already has a mortgage, what does that path look like if they want to sit down with you and talk to you about their situation?
Yeah, so I'd probably say the first thing we do in terms of just from the mortgage side of things, we take a look at, okay, what is your current balance, what's your current rate, and what would the penalty be to break that mortgage? So let's assume that mortgage isn't coming due for the next few months. What's the penalty to break the mortgage? And then we take a look at the interest savings on the new mortgage that we're getting. Okay, so how much interest will we save to offset that penalty? And then taking it one step further, if let's just say that that's a break even, or even if the new interest isn't saving as much as what that penalty would be, let's take a look at how much interest is being wasted on the credit cards. Okay, and then we can take a look at the new cash flow that we have coming in to kind of, again, pay that mortgage down sooner, so that even if we don't have an immediate return on the interest savings on the mortgage, do we have a return worthwhile enough to break that mortgage currently? So those are the kind of immediate things that I look at when considering whether a client should refinance right now, because sometimes the penalty, especially if somebody's with a bank, is so prohibitive that it just doesn't make sense to refinance right now. So I sit down with the client and kind of give them that news that either A, yes, here's the avenue we can go down, or B, look, the penalty is so high we just can't quite recover enough of the interest to offset that penalty is being charged right now. So that's a scenario where we just look to follow up over time as interest rates change and the balance of the mortgage gets paid down, etc.
I've got one more question for you, Chris. Before we leave, I just want to find out, why would people want to deal with the mortgage professionals, and what makes you guys unique?
Yeah, so the reason why somebody would come to the mortgage professionals is kind of like what I said before. We educate rather than sell. We're not there to sell a mortgage. We are there to develop a relationship, develop a rapport. We've been in Kingston in business since 1989. We have a great reputation in Kingston amongst realtors and amongst our clients. And we'll give you kind of our honest, upfront opinion as to what makes sense for you going forward. And if there's a better option out there, we'll be happy to tell you about it. If there's a better way we can do things for you, then we're happy to outline it for you. I myself have been in the business since 2005, and I absolutely love what I do. And I don't see myself doing anything different. And I guess actually brings me to another good point is continuity of that relationship. There are some great people out there in the banking world. There's some great brokers out there. When you go to your bank, you might find there's a great person sitting in front of you. But if they're that good, they're going to be promoted. They're going to be moved around. And so that person that you meet with day one might not be the same person that you meet with a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Whereas myself, again, I've been doing it since 2005, and I'm going to continue to do it until I can't do it anymore. So if continuity of the relationship is something that's important to you, that's a great reason to sit down with me.
Thanks, Chris. This has been awesome, and I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure everyone's going to find this very helpful. Take care and have a wonderful day.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, see ya.
Well, that's Chris Matthey with the Mortgage Professionals, and I hope you found that information helpful. Please send me an email letting me know if this was good information for you guys, and I'll keep continuing to send you out a few videos here and there. And hopefully this will get you through. And if you have any questions with Chris, you can give him a call directly. I'll put his contact information at the end of this video. Take care and have a wonderful day. I think that's good stuff.
Yes.
I'm going to cut my video out. I'm going to reinsert something a little better that I'm looking at the camera, but other than that.
Yeah, I was just trying to think if there's anything else that I can go over. And do you think I rambled too much on certain things? Like, do you think you want to redo any sections?
And I don't think you rambled at all. I'm thinking, I wish, I'm all through this, I'm thinking,
I wish I could talk like Chris. Because I have to do a redo over every question on mine.
I was just happy that I didn't kind of get lost in thought in any of those or start rambling on one point too much. At a certain few times, I'm like, okay, wrap it up, Chris. You're going on too long. So I try to shift it, but all right, fair enough.